Well, hello and welcome to another episode of the Imperfect Men's Club podcast. Once again, I'm here with my friend and colleague, Jim Gurley. My name's Mark Aylward, and today we're going to talk about what a pretty interesting topic. And it's to me, it's like a three-pronged topic. It's the notion of personal responsibility. On top of that, self accountability, and then the issue that kind of sometimes gets in the way of those things, which is pride. And obviously, when we use the wheel, we come out of the center of the wheel to one of the areas of life. And I think the self in the middle, self awareness is kind of, gosh, so much comes from self awareness, Jim. It's just incredible. But I think the topic is stemming from a story that I was told by my brother. And my brother, just for some context, has been a pilot his whole life. Started flying, got his license the day he turned 16, and was a fighter pilot in the Air Force Reserve, flew F-15s for 20 years, 15, 20 years, and has been a commercial captain flying internationally, getting ready to retire in about a year. So very, very interesting cat, and very accomplished, good storyteller. And these guys are unique. These fighter pilots are unique. They're kind of like, they're nuts, but they're so competent and capable. You put nuts on top of that, it turns into some good stories. So, Jim, I know we had some fun talking about it. I don't know if before I get into the story, if you want to add some of your context.
Like I said, Mark, I would just first of all enjoyed the article. It was you posted on LinkedIn last night, I think it was, and it was just an entertaining story. But what it goes to the core of something that I think as men we're not very good at sometimes, and that's being self accountable. And but the great thing about this story that you write is there's a lot on the line here, and I'll let you get more into the specifics of it. But what I want the listeners to walk away with today is about, like you said, number one, everything it starts with our self awareness, ourself, and then how this affects us in different parts of our life. In this case, it was his profession, his career, but then also self responsibility, self accountability, and probably most important, all self forgiveness. So we fuck up. I think that was first thing you wrote in the article. There's times when we fuck up, but you have to take the responsibility for it and then move on. And I'll share some stories as we get into it, just that happened to come about around the same time. And a very good friend of ours that's going through a difficult period in time, a divorce, that also came clean about the importance, especially at this stage in our lives, right? Like to be accountable and to take the hit so you can come out the other side a better human, but also better the people around you. So
And thank you for bringing that up. I wanted to share with everybody that I've been writing a newsletter for us for a while now, not as consistently as I would like, but I've committed to be more consistent with that on a monthly basis. And it's also called the Imperfect Men's Club newsletter. It's on LinkedIn. So if you like what you hear, you'll probably like some of the stuff that you can read there too. And maybe that's a better way for you to consume information. But just be aware that it's out there, and we'd love to have you subscribe. The more subscribers we have, the more we can spread this kind of message around. But that's let's connect the dots on those two things
yeah,
as
so
well.
take us through this again as a very high level summary of what led to you writing this article, and then what the takeaways were. And it's personal to you because this conversation with your brother, your dad's part of this conversation, and then your younger brother, which is really struggling at this stage in his life. So
Yeah, and that's where it stemmed from. And I think, without throwing him under the bus, because, he's not the only guy struggling with addiction or alcoholism right now. And I don't need to use his name, and chances of him hearing this are remote at best.
Mhm.
And he's not employed right now. So he's not, there's no threat to his gainful employment. But his problems, in my humble opinion, are centered around the issue of pride. He's not yet gotten past his pridefulness to be able to say, I fucked up and I got to do something about it. I am in the circumstances I'm in because of me and no one else and nothing else. And until I can get to that point, it's cloudy. It's going to be cloudy, and the sun doesn't shine until I say I fucked up.
Mhm.
right? So, I'm in communication with him. He's in recovery now, and I think physically he's doing well. I think he's physically recovering, but mentally he's so prideful. It's amazing to me that he could still be so prideful. Anyway,
So how do you tie these two stories together? And again, I'll
I
let you.
call I call I send him a note, and part of the response is about his pride.
I
And
see.
and I sent him my love and told him I missed him, but you got to get your
Yeah.
pride is your
But the
worst enemy right
context
now.
of this, what inspired you to write this story was the
Right, I'm getting
conversation
there.
that
I'm
you
getting
had
there.
with your
So
brother. Yeah, yeah.
so I have this his note to me that triggered this response to him was a picture of his son at prom with his date. And I don't need to get into all the details there, but he shared something in that transmission, in that simple email with a picture that was evident that he's prideful. He's stuck in this this isn't my fault thing. And what I did with the picture, because he asked me to, is I sent it to my father and my brother, my older brother. And so it was almost immediate. My father called. He calls me in the morning early before he goes to church. So we only usually talk for 15 minutes. We didn't get into too much of this. Then my brother called. And when he calls me, he's home because he's a pilot. He's either gone and
Mhm,
incommunicado, or he's home and he can talk for a while.
mhm,
And we talked about this pride issue. And he goes, I got to tell you this story. I may have told you this before. And then he starts talking about a couple of the guys in his squadron, one of whom he says is probably the best storyteller ever, who
mhm,
originally told my brother this story. But the story that the pilot that the story is about was in my brother's squadron. So my brother knew him.
mhm,
Um, but anyway, I'll tell it through the eyes of me having heard it from my brother, and I'll use the same caveat I did in the newsletter. I don't know anything about aviation, so I'm going to use words that don't make any sense, and I'm sure there's much cooler words and acronyms, but I don't know meteorology, I don't know instruments, I don't know any of the stuff that when my brother tells this story, he is completely 100% accurate, and it makes the story even better. So
mhm.
you're not going to get that version today. And any pilots out there that are listening, I'm not pretending I know anything about aviation. Okay. so, this guy, this particular pilot who the story is about is out on I think they call them sorties. It's a mission. It's fake fighting with other, pilots from other countries. We'll fly up there with Italy and, France and Germany, and they make all these arrangements. So these guys are all pretty good. I think the Americans are still considered some of the better pilots.
Mhm.
So
But
this
these are
guy's
with actual other countries, or this is
yeah.
our own military pretending to be another country?
Well, they do both, and thank you for saying. I'm not sure which one.
Okay, great. Yeah.
So it could have been with other Americans, but typically when my brother has told me stories like this before, he's flying against other countries because they
Because
like
they're
to benefit.
practicing as well.
Practicing. Everyone's trying to learn from everyone else. Yeah. The
Very cool.
allies, obviously.
Yeah.
We're not flying with the Russians. So,
Yeah.
but the pilot whose story this is about, and I'll start at the end because he's up there and he's been up there for a while. He's in an F-15 and they're off the northeast coast of the United States, and so there's water involved and there's land involved. They're at the end, and one of the things that happens at the end of a mission sometimes is you're almost out of fuel, but there's a mechanism in the plane. I'm just going to call it the alarm. That you set the alarm when the fuel tanks and the mileage get to a point where the plane basically tells you it's time to go home. It's time to turn around. And that's a life-saving device. It's not like your fucking alarm clock that you wake up with. If you don't pay attention to this alarm or you forget to set the alarm, you could die.
Mhm.
And so he then sees when the alarm goes off a B-52, I think my brother said, which is a big bomber, is coming into his line of sight, and he goes to himself, "Oh, I can take this guy out. I'll get one more kill, make me look good when I get back, and it'll only take me a few seconds, but I'm conscious of the fact that I got to turn around." Then he gets into the heat of the battle and takes a little longer to get this guy shot down. Uh, uh, you know, in a relative sense. And then a warning light goes on. Now he's fucked, potentially, right? And he has a couple of choices. He can take the plane out over the water, excuse me, eject it and dump it in the water and I don't know how much an F-15 is today, but it's tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars.
Wow.
So there's that. His reputation is tarnished because F-15 fighter pilots aren't supposed to make mistakes like this. And my brother actually said, you know, it's one thing if you had to dump a plane because of a malfunction in the plane, that's a completely different
Mhm.
circumstance. You have to dump a plane because you fucked up.
It's a
That's a
mental mistake.
completely, yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's a big deal. So this is all going on in this guy's head, and
In a matter of seconds.
he doesn't have any time to think about
No, no,
this.
this is not minutes. This is not days.
No, 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 no. This is nanoseconds, right?
Yeah,
It's like
exactly. Yeah.
it's quick. And so what does he do? He's got a couple choices. He can, like I said, dump it in the water, turn around and start going home and cross his fingers, right? But now you
Mhm.
got civilian casualties in play and you got
Yeah.
infrastructure in play going down over land. Or he can call the base and maybe somebody can pull him out of this grave, you know. And he calls the base, and my brother says to me, just by coincidence, the guy who answers the phone, who's in that support role now at this point in his career, has more hours in the F-15 than almost anyone else in the whole world. Well, check that box, right? Luck number one, right? And he basically says, you know, because he doesn't have any time, I fucked up. And the guy goes, what happened? He goes, he told him what happened. And the guy, he goes, what do I do? And the guy's like, dump everything you can, dump your missiles, dump your exterior fuel tanks, any machinations that you can eject, just jettison them now, go right up to 28,000 feet, put the plane on low fuel consumption mode. I suppose that just allows it to go only a certain speed, and point the thing back here, and I'll stay with you. And long story short, the guy made it back on fumes, as my brother would say. Now, fumes in an F-15 might be 100 gallons, but you know, not he was almost out of gas when he got home. So the thing that struck me was, because I'm familiar with F-15 pilots, I've been at the base having beers with these guys, and they're a different. I mean, it's a level above professional athlete. It's
Oh yeah.
unbelievable. These guys are defying death all the time.
Yep.
And so for a guy from that kind of makeup to immediately go with, I fucked up, I'm responsible for this,
Mhm.
this is how I get access to help, otherwise I'm in a guessing game of life and death. That you got to push your pride right out of the way. You got to forget about your reputation, you got to forget about everything and just go, what's the best course of action? And that's to call for help.
Yeah.
So we can take that a lot of different
Oh
places, Jim,
yeah.
but
Yeah, but there's a lot of things. First thing that comes to mind is like you said, just the level of training it takes to get to that, the disciplines that you have to even qualify to be one of those uh, pilots is at a whole other level, right? As far as
it's insane.
insane. But the training also kicks in, right? It's not just, and I think that's what you're speaking to. This is next level stuff, but it also applies to decisions that we have to make at points in our life too. And even though it may not be the other people in terms of civilians on the ground or expensive aircraft, they do it. It does affect people. It does affect lives, and often it can affect your own life as far as where it goes.
Yeah,
And
we
so
all we all have these well,
moments, yep,
first of all, we all fuck up, right? Let's go. It's
we do, and we have
imperfect.
these moments of whether we're going to try to, with our pride, to your point, Mark, wrestle this through on our own, or have the courage to to pick up the phone and hope that the person that answers that phone uh, is in a place or has had the experience to help you make the best decision. And that's what this conversation is about. That's what this is about, because they think those moments do come in our lifetime, and you hope that somebody that you have a relationship with, that you trust, and you hope that that person is in a better place than you are, right? More stable place
No,
to give.
that's definitely. I mean, to me, that's God reaching down saying, "I'm going to put the right guy on
Oh, absolutely. I
the
think
phone." You
there's,
know,
yeah,
that's
it's bigger than
and
us. Like you said, this goes beyond a
it does.
coincidence. This is next level in terms of spirituality and a greater source and all these other things. But I certainly can remember. In fact, now I think about it, um, I've made a couple of those calls. I
Yeah.
could probably think of 2 or 3.
Yeah.
And, and then one just came in for me from another friend. I was the guy. I was the on the end of picking up the phone and then
Mhm.
giving the advice and knowing I gave the it's not I don't like to use the word best advice because you don't think about it. You just like that pilot that picked up the phone, he didn't have to think about anything. He
Mhm.
went immediately in, do this, do this, do that.
Yep.
He didn't
Yep.
say, let me think about it and call you back. No, one, he
Yeah.
took the call.
No, they didn't have the luxury of
They
that.
didn't, but it goes to show you just how certain he was. You have one option, do it. And of course, the training, but also the advice that he was given was life changing for everybody. And
Yeah.
that now I understand how you tie it back to your
Yeah,
younger
yeah.
brother,
Yeah.
and he hasn't been able to make that call yet. And he just,
No, no, and I feel bad about that. The other thing that comes to mind is I just shot a video series about Will Rogers, the wisdom of Will Rogers, and one of the quotes, I took 8 quotes and made 8 videos, and one of them was live your life in such a way that you would not be ashamed to sell your parrot to the town gossip.
yeah.
And it's about living your life as if people are looking. So I think sometimes I do this anyway. Sometimes I think I can get away with that because no one saw me or no one heard me. Well, in my experience, all that does is encourage whatever it was to be worse, to get worse. And so that's a thing too. If this guy
Well,
doesn't,
yeah, Mark, I think what you're speaking of, speaking to, I should say, is the ego, right? When is the ego overriding your best judgment? And
yeah,
often, especially I think when we're younger, when you get older, I think you get a little more clear on it's all bullshit anyway. So who you're trying to impress, right? You almost feel like a fool to believe that you spent parts of your life trying to please people that you don't even know or care about.
yep,
And this is why when you said pride, you do have to get to a point where you're willing to give up your pride to come out of the other side of this a better person, and then also grateful for the people around you. And again, I'll share a very short story about the call that came in to me yesterday against somebody that we know, and a horrible, not horrible, but an end of a marriage. And he was in a dark place, and we've all been there, and you just don't want to talk to anybody. You don't want to pick up the phone because you don't want to, one, burden people with with your problems. There also is a part of some pride. You don't want to show that maybe you've made some mistakes and you're embarrassed to share them with others
yeah,
because your ego's talking.
yeah. And what I was thinking of as well, and I know who you're talking about, and I do want to talk a little bit about that without being specific about who it might be or where, because it's just a common thread. Is I remember not wanting to call people and talk to people because I didn't want them to pity me, and I think
Oh,
that's
interesting. He
relate.
said something similar to that, and you're
Yeah.
talking about your divorce, right? At your
Yes.
lowest point,
Yes.
because
At
I
some
think there
point,
is.
at
I
some
haven't
point,
been
it's
through a divorce, but there is a very, very low point when you know this relationship is completely over, and now it's spilling into other parts of your life,
yeah.
which is your
la-
children mostly, right, and
Yeah.
your parents and so on. Yeah.
Yeah. It lasts about 7 years.
Mhm. But there had to have been that one moment where you go, well, you knew she was crazy to begin with, but you go, this craziness is at a whole other level, and now she's angry, and now she wants to push that out to the world, her pain, and punish you.
Yeah,
And
and it wasn't even the punishing of me as it was how astounding it was what she was willing to do to punish her children to hurt
yes,
me. And
yeah,
that's
yeah.
really that takes that to another level,
Well, I'm glad you
That's like the
mentioned the
difference.
children because now we're talking about it. They weren't adult children. This situation, they're adult children, so it does change things a little bit. But again, in respect to his privacy, I think, and I just again, I just respect him so much for what he said, but also what he did, and that was I had to come clean with my children, my the people I cared most around me, and that was not easy to do because it was going to require, just like this pilot, some embarrassment, some criticism, and some realities that he didn't want to face. but he
Yeah,
did.
I
And I
wonder,
totally respect his courage for doing it.
yeah,
Uh,
I wonder how much this pilot, um, thought about what was going to happen to him, his reputation,
yeah.
the punishment that was awaiting him, the fact that he had to say he was sorry. My
I see. I
story,
read all that in your article. I that's that I when I it was a great article, but that's what I kept thinking is, wow, he had he knew that, but at first he was trying to protect that from having to go through that, and then he realized either through his training or for whatever, I need to make this call, and the right guy picked up the call, and the rest, is history.
it's total speculation on my part,
Mhm.
but I don't think he thought about getting in trouble or apologizing or his reputation. I don't think there was time. I think to your point, it was his training that kicked in.
That's
And
right.
it makes me think of my dad because he used to, and I've told you this before when we were kids, he
Yeah,
used to use aviation because he was a pilot too,
yeah,
a fighter pilot as well, uh, for life lessons. And he would
yeah.
say to me, things like, "What's the first thing you do, Mark, when an engine catches on fire?"
Mhm.
And I didn't know first time, I said, "What?" He goes, "Nothing." And
Hmm.
that ties right back into the training. You lower the emotional level, you
Mhm.
don't panic, you don't react, you
Yeah.
allow your subconscious to go back to the training because
So,
you know
so
what to do.
yeah, yeah. The first thing to think of that is, what do you do when your ex crazy wife catches fire? What's the first thing you do? Nothing.
Arguably nothing, but I didn't really figure that one out in real time.
I just had it. I'm just saying. What do you do when when the crazy goes so crazy and it catches on fire and now it's out? Trying
Well,
to destroy the universe,
yeah, yeah, take us all down.
to take
You
us
know, I,
all down, because that
there's
that day will come.
Yeah. There's so many things in life, so many times in life, at least for me, where you're confronted with something for the first time. So you don't know what to do by training
Yeah,
because you haven't been trained for this. I didn't
yeah,
train to get divorced. I didn't know anything that was going to be in front of me.
yeah.
But I think I see a lot of evidence, and I'm hypocritical when I say this because I'm human, and that is, you do stuff every once in a while that you shouldn't do, or you say something you shouldn't say. I was
Of
thinking of a
course.
conversation I,
Yeah.
I had with my daughter, and I said the wrong thing. As soon as it came out of my mouth, I knew it was the wrong thing, and I saw her face react, confirming it was the wrong thing,
Mhm.
and I immediately said, "Honey, I'm sorry. I should not have said
Yeah,
that."
that's cool. I'm really glad you mentioned that, because, like I said, it's one thing to say I fucked up. It's another thing to come back and then apologize for that, or really take the time and say, "Hey, after thinking about this, I would have done this differently." And that also is so good for the relationship that you have with your daughter or whoever it is. It doesn't have to be just
Whoever it
whatever
is,
it
yeah,
is. Yeah,
yeah. I think there's all those steps, right? It's like I fucked up. Oh shit, what do I do? How can I lean on
yeah.
experience or training? What's going to happen to my reputation? What kind of trouble am I going to get in? And who do I apologize
And
to?
the consequences, the unknown consequences of how it can affect the, in this case, it was somebody that he loved more than anything, right? It was his daughter. And he
Mhm.
knew that if he didn't have that conversation, that hard conversation, and take full responsibility for it and apologize for it, that it would change the relationship with his daughter forever. And,
Yeah.
and again, I just respect him so much for having the courage to do that.
Well, it
Mm.
feels in the moment that you decide you're going to apologize, and I've always found apologizing difficult.
Yeah.
I've done it pretty well, I think, but I've always, in the moment you're like, I'm sacrificing something. I'm admitting to a flaw. I'm admitting that I'm not perfect. Well,
Yeah.
everyone fucking knows that already. So don't worry about it, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and there's so many places I see a lot of this in the corporate America, that my experience is going and talking to leaders in companies and talking
Mhm.
to doers in companies, both from both sides. And it's like people get into projects, man, and they invest time and money. And there are people inside of these projects that are making mistakes, knowing that they made a mistake
Yeah.
and not bringing it to the attention of
Not,
their
yeah.
leader because they're embarrassed. And what
That's right.
happens is the leader who could help them get out of that mistake quickly and wants to know if something's wrong is like, why aren't you telling me this stuff until
Yeah.
it's too late? Because it's
Yeah.
not going to go, things don't go away,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. Let's talk about the person that answers the call. In this case, another fighter pilot well, you even go into his background, his credentials, right? So let's talk about that and then tie that into who you call and who's on the other line and what the advice they give you. But in this case, to tell us that this particular fighter pilot,
Yeah.
obviously this is a
Well,
drill, but
there's guys when there's guys in the air, there's guys on the ground in case somebody gets in trouble, right? So
right, yeah, yeah,
they can get access to
yeah,
things that you can't get access to in the
yeah,
plane, like,
yeah,
weather conditions or whatever. I'm not a
yeah,
pilot. But this
yeah.
guy, my brother said that just by happenstance, the guy that happened to answer this call at that time was one of the most experienced F-15 fighter pilots in the world.
Well, it's
So,
not just by happenstance. It wasn't the local maintenance crew that answered the phone. There's
yeah.
a reason why he picked up that call.
Yeah, well,
So there was some reasons why he had that job, right?
yeah,
In the event that this happens. But this
it's a high,
clearly was the right guy
yeah,
for to answer
yeah.
this call. But some of that was not pure luck.
Well, you know what else it makes me think about is like when the dust is all settled,
Yeah,
this pilot gets back to the base and he gets punished, he gets reprimanded, he apologizes, whatever needs to
yeah,
take place as a result of this um, bad call. When does he have the opportunity to sit down with the guy that answered the phone and go, "Hey, dude,
yeah.
thanks."
Yeah, I think I'm trying to spin this obviously in my own selfish way, but I'm trying to spin it is that sometimes we are that person on that call,
Mhm.
and it's our wisdom, it's our experiences to give good advice, and it feels good. I'm sure he felt good to know that he saved a life, he saved a lot of money for the U.S. government,
Yep.
but he had worked all his life also to be at that place at that time to have an
Well, with the
impact on
way
something, the
the
outcome. So
the
yeah.
specificity with which he answered to the question, "What do I do?"
Mhm.
would indicate to me that the guy had been in a similar situation himself.
That's right.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
there's so many places to go with this. There's so many
There
places to
is.
go
There
with
is. I
it.
mean, I remember, I think it was last week when we were recording, I happened to receive these three calls from three guys in their 30s that don't have any knowledge of one another with a similar question. So I'm not, giving it this equal to this situation, but we are especially again, at this stage in our life with our experiences, being that person that takes that call, that there's a lot of responsibility, but there's a lot of gratification, yeah, gratification for taking that call to know that you can help somebody at that moment. And I certainly remember when I was struggling. I remember very, very well. In fact, I was having this conversation today, and I'll never, ever um, forget or to acknowledge the person that took that call.
Mhm,
I was struggling, and I think you're right about the time you and I met
mhm.
with depression. That's something I never ever expected, never had signs of that. And you get in these very, very dark moments, and the world just gets so dark, and all you want to do is just hide. All you want to do is just cover yourself up and hope that this goes away.
Yeah, yeah, and it never does on its own.
Oh, it never does, and that's why,
Yeah,
again, I'm going back to this conversation. The worst thing you can do is do that. The best thing you can do is start to have a conversation with somebody you trust that knows you,
yep.
that's not gonna judge you, and then gives you that. And I remember, the person that took that call, you've heard me refer to him time. It's kinda like your brother. He's a fighter pilot, so when he's on, he's not available, but when he's available, he's available. Fortunately, he was a professional baseball manager at the time, and it was off season,
Mm,
and and I think he just happened to call me. It was one of those, just like yesterday. I happened to call. This was an incoming call. I made the call to him. I just had this feeling something wasn't right.
mhm.
He calls me and he asked me, how I was doing, and of course, we say, "Oh, I'm doing fine." This time, I couldn't even lie to him. I couldn't lie to him. He was my
Yep,
friend, and I
yep,
said,
yep,
"I'm not doing too good."
yep, yep. That's a hard thing to say,
Again, and
but
I'm getting, it's kind of funny. I'm getting emotional just thinking about it because I said, yeah, he said, yeah, he said, uh, Yeah, I think it was just more. It was, hey, yeah, we all go through these moments in time, right? It was
Yeah.
empathy first. He gave me some empathy, like, hey,
Yeah.
look at, I've been through this too. Remember when this happened, or I got fired from this, and everybody in the world, or not the world, but in Major League Baseball at the time, knew about that. Those are those low points, and so the first thing is you provide some empathy, and then you provide a perspective that maybe they wouldn't have because they're so close to it. Um,
Yeah. I think I think we all make those calls and we all take those calls. And
yep.
I feel a sense, and I say this in a positive way, I feel a sense of pride in the willingness of people to reach out to me for help because they know that I care and that I will help if I can. And I think that's the way it unrolls when you take that call, Jim. I think it's you, first thing you do is listen, and then you offer empathy, right?
Hmm.
Without kissing their ass, or you be authentically. And then what I do next is I start asking questions. So tell me what's going on.
Yeah, yeah. I think the other thing is because you trust who they are, because that relationship is already in place. There was some credibility. So the first words that come out of your mouth that gets made me think about what you were saying about the questions they ask are so important. There's a split second that how you respond to that question or that conversation is gonna be imprinted in their mind forever.
Yeah.
And I remember, this is just yesterday. I said, "Hey, um, you know, in life." Well, I'm just talking about marriage, and I truly believe this. I said, marriage is a social construct, right? And it's based on a lot of things, religion, some other things that have evolved into this day and age where um, an ended marriage somehow has become like a bad thing. But
Mhm.
really, in my opinion, it shouldn't be considered a bad thing. I mean, look at you, Mark. It is, you came out of it with a pretty good deal. You got three beautiful children. So it's not as if a marriage serves us well for our entire lives. There's nothing wrong with looking at it as, it was not a failure by any means. It was very successful for what it provided at that time, and reframing what an end of a marriage is. And I think the one point that was made was, I use this analogy often. Why is it that when you go get a driver's license, you have to renew it after so many years, right?
Mhm.
Or if you get, there's other licenses that you get, but those are renewable. They only last for so long, and then you make a decision whether or not you want to renew it, whether you need it or not. And I don't
Mhm.
know why a marriage license is any different. It really should be something that you look at as, it provided a purpose for a period of time, but it doesn't necessarily should renewal. It should be a conversation about, hey, this has served us well up to this point, but maybe this next phase in our life, it doesn't apply. And
Yeah,
then it is. It's a big difference.
that's a whole podcast episode unto
Yeah, it could
itself.
be, but anyway,
And I
and it
I
worked.
I
He
I
he
have
seemed to appreciate my perspective on
I
it.
have an unfortunately large amount of experience in that space, so we could talk for a while. No, I'm sorry to hear about your friend, and I really think
No,
because you
I don't think it apology. Like, that's what I was saying. I don't want to get off topic, but Tyler's reframing. I knew at that moment that I can help him reframe his definition of marriage, and my definition of a marriage, whether it's successful or unsuccessful. It's all bullshit anyway. What makes somebody believe that was a failure? That was not a failed marriage. That was actually a quite successful marriage. In this case, it was multiple decades.
yeah,
And
two beautiful kids. Yeah.
yeah, so it's just like a lot of things, helping somebody um, reframe your perspective at that moment in time, because then they feel good about, hey, I can come out of this better on the other end. I'll be a better human because of this. Uh,
Well, I think in my experience, whether it's the pilot we're talking about, or me or you or your friend, I think that when you when you say I fucked up, when you admit to your failing, your mistake, um, it's in the moment, it's difficult. But what happens after the fact, in most cases, in my experiences, now I'm looked upon with even more respect because I was willing to
Hmm.
expose my human frailty, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I'm perfect
Hmm.
because only assholes do that. So
Hmm.
it's such a nuanced topic, from apologizing to I fucked up to what do I do now to I don't know what to do, please help to well I don't didn't want to talk to you because I was embarrassed, my pride was damaged,
Hmm.
and there's so much there. It's such a rich life experience.
It is. It also could be seen as a cleansing that we need in our lives. A
Hmm.
cleansing, like it flushes out all the garbage, all of the residue that is built up over these years, and you could come out the other end even a better person.
Yeah,
Um,
it is. Cleansing's
be,
a good word.
yeah.
Cleansing's a good word because when you're hanging on to something that you fucked up and you're
Oh
holding on
man.
to it and you're not sharing it with somebody else,
Yeah,
all it's going to do is eat you alive.
it does. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, you're right. And if you look at what a disease is, that's
Mhm.
what a disease is, right? A
Yeah.
disease is they start off as thoughts and events that eventually build up toxins and residues in your body that eventually come out as cancer or other things. That's I'm not making this up. I'm sure somebody else could do a better job of
Well,
describing
no,
how
that
it
it's
works, but
yeah,
it
no, I
is
think it's the direct correlation between stress and
absolutely.
cortisol levels and all kinds of different. Yeah, no, I think disease is maybe equally as caused by mental things as it is caused by physical things. So,
Yeah, that's a scientific fact. That's not something that we're just hacking up for the podcast, but
yeah.
that's been
So
proven.
just a
Yeah.
reminder, I think that if you like what you hear here, keep in mind that newsletter exists, the Imperfect Men's Club
Yep.
newsletter on LinkedIn, and it's attached to my name, Mark Aylward, Aylward, if you want to find it. But yeah, I think we have like 500 subscribers, and I didn't start it to seek out subscribers, but I think,
Hmm.
connecting with people in an audio fashion and then even a visual fashion, and then the written word. Some people consume better the written word than they do other medium. So
Yep.
yeah, that's out there, and
Yeah.
I love this topic. I think we can come up with a
Yeah.
lot of other topics that are related to this discussion. It opened up a couple of Pandora's boxes for
Yeah.
me.
But I'm glad you mentioned LinkedIn because even though it's known as a professional, because it is, I believe it's for percep- professional network and connecting. This does tie into our profession, right? Everything. This goes back to our framework of the Imperfect Men's Club podcast of these 5 areas of our life, and um, they're going on whether we're aware of it now or not, and this
Yeah,
will affect your professional career, even though it's not directly related. It is one of the areas that we refer to as others, right?
you know what I see happening in culturally speaking, and again, this is just from my perspective. I could be way off base, but and it being a professional advisor my whole
Yeah,
life, and then you add to that being a father,
yeah,
you add to that my age, aka my experience, just facing
yeah,
these challenges as a human. Um, I see the personal and professional worlds kind of melding together,
yeah, yeah. This is
producing,
next level stuff, but
yeah,
I like where you're
producing,
going with this. Yeah.
producing things like empathetic leadership,
Hmm.
and being aware of where people are in their personal lives
Yeah.
if you're leading them and how it factors into their professional lives. And you know guys taking time off now to take care of their kids, not just
Hmm.
women anymore. And these and remote work from COVID and what COVID did
Yeah.
I mean, all of these things. LinkedIn is now not just a professional
Hmm.
platform, it's also personal, and some people are in there complaining about that,
Yeah.
and some people are in there saying what I just said, which is like, you know what, this is cool, this is okay, we probably shouldn't consider professional you independent of personal you because it's the same you, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway,
Yeah,
we can get in.
yeah, appreciate you saying that. I think it was part of our vision when we met uh, in your place in Orlando, Florida, and whiteboarded this about bringing these two worlds together because they have been in their own individual silos in the past, but but based on your experience and my experience in life, they shouldn't be. They have to be. Eventually, they're going to connect, and we take more of a holistic approach to being your best version of yourself. Um, that will tie directly back to your profession,
Yep.
among just being a better person, right? What the world needs, because man, we got a lot of shitheads right now that we need
Well,
to.
well, and I think of this pilot in the story, and
Yeah,
at the end of the day,
yeah,
when we get from put my pride aside, I fucked up. What do I do? And
hmm,
then I'm sorry I did that. I could take my punishment like a man. Hey, dude, thank you so much for being there when I called.
yeah,
Then he goes home, right? And then whatever home is, his kids are impacted by that. His wife's impacted by that. His parents are impacted by that. You can't just unplug from that professional almost disaster, right? So
yeah. Think about his self worth when he came home that day.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but
that's gonna punch you a few times in a few different places. But
yeah,
anyway, I think I'm all wrapped up, Jim. I don't know if you had any
okay.
final
No,
thoughts
no, it
to
was good.
share.
That was good. Glad you shared that story with you, and I wish all the best to your brother
Yeah, thanks,
and
dude.
his recovery. So,
All
all
right,
right,
talk to you next week.
talk to you next week.